The Remembering Hour, A Story of Yyth. Chapter 1. The Remembering Hour. Time, to most in the outer lands, is a measure of decay. To Magister Helbarin Nor, it was a medium of movement. He lived alone in a tower that was never quite the same height each day. Sometimes 7 stories, sometimes 2. Sometimes there were windows he didn't remember building. Sometimes a raven pecked at glass panes that hadn't been cleaned yet. He'd stopped trusting clocks after the 3rd week of testing the spiral of tide spell, his own invention. His fingers were permanently smudged with time ink, the kind only mages of the Red Order could afford, mined from beneath the ruins of broken ore. His goal was simple: make time a road, not a wall. But the road had potholes, and occasionally, traffic. The problem of versions. Helbarin had catalogued 16 encounters with himself. Of them were hostile. 3 had warned him not to proceed. 1 tried to kill him with a knife made of frozen memory. Only one version of him, the 3rd Helbarin, wearing a white sash scorched with spellfire, had begged for help. He'd died in the atrium beneath a starless night, whispering, "Burn the seed before it thinks." That particular phrase still haunted Helbarin's dreams. He didn't know what it meant, not yet. Memory distortions. Each time travel attempt came with cognitive price. Small nouns vanished. People he'd loved were sometimes strangers in his recollection. Maps shifted. One day, Mage Town was east of the Shimmerfield. Next, it was gone entirely, replaced by a salt lake with statues of weeping horses. Helbarin began leaving himself notes. Not paper, not voice records. He tattooed them to his back, in mirror script, in a language only he knew, Empharic, the tongue of the stillborn moon. Each time he looped, he had to decipher his own warnings. Once, the message read, "You are not the first to read this spine." He shuddered for a full hour. The decision. The latest intrusion was different. The man who entered the tower was him, but older, limping, dressed in green silk, crusted with blood and mud. "I've seen what you do next," said the elder version. "I'm here to stop you." "And if I don't?" asked Helbarin. The older version looked at the spell circle, drawn across the floor. Blue chalk. 14 runes, and the ash of his father's bones as a focusing anchor. "You die screaming," the older Helbarin said. "Or worse, you succeed." The question: is he obligated to kill this future version to preserve his own freedom? Or was he always fated to die by his own hand? Is time fixed, or is it choice rippling? In the margins of his spellbook, next to a diagram titled, "The Reverse Hourglass," he wrote, "If I kill him, I kill me. If I spare him, I become him. If I flee, I fragment time. If I wait, maybe I already did." He closed the book, drew the chalk, and whispered, "Round we go." Chapter 2. Apprentice to the End. The tower had grown 2 floors overnight. That was often a sign Helbarin had altered something in the past, or that something from the future was already correcting him. He descended the spiral stair, spellbook tucked beneath one arm, fingertips glowing with mnemonic ink. At the bottom stood a young man wrapped in an ill-fitting travel cloak, boots, soaked in marsh water, and the distinct stench of starfen lantern moss. He carried a brass time dial on a chain, cracked and humming with violet heat. "Artie Van?" the young man said before Helbarin could ask. "You're about to kill yourself. And you've come to watch?" "No," said Artie, stepping forward. "I've come to stop you." Legacy entangled. Helbarin blinked. His mind began unspooling the paradox. "You're my apprentice," he said slowly. "Will be," Artie corrected. "Or would have been. Depending on how this ends." He pulled out a folded page from the Chronomancer's index, signed by Helbarin himself. "I kept the receipt," Artie said. Then he sobered. "You were brilliant. You taught me the rule of memory, the loops of 5, even the forbidden anchoring grid." Helbarin narrowed his eyes. "I never teach that." "You do, in 3 years. In a tower with only 3 floors and a garden that grows backwards. A harder truth. Artie dropped a black cube. It unfolded into a whispering glyph, time-locked memory shard. A holographic Helbarin appeared. If you're seeing this, then I've failed. Artie, stop me before I cast the spiral one last time. The image vanished. Artie turned. You never taught me why you were afraid to succeed. Shift. Helbarin stared. Artie wasn't a warning, he was a consequence. Helbarin stepped back from the circle. You'll kill 1,000 futures if you touch me. No, said Artie. Quiet now. I'm here to replace you. Passing the torch, reluctantly. Helbarin laughed, bitter and low. He handed the book to Artie. You won't like what you find in here. I don't have to like it, Artie replied. I just have to do better. Chapter 3. The Making of Fixed Points. Artie Van discovered early that memory was not enough. When you traveled time, even just a few days backward, your mind fuzzed out details like a dream already halfway erased by breakfast. The past didn't want to be remembered by those who didn't belong in it. And so, he began to make marks. Petty vice as anchor. His first attempts were foolish, juvenile, but they worked. He snuck into the wine vaults of Magetown's South Quarter and drank 3 bottles of Orleans Flame in a single sitting. The burn left his throat raw for days. Next loop, the burn was still there. He remembered it. He was anchored. He escalated, gambled away a full pouch of red gems at Knife's Edge Tavern, kissed a merchant's husband in full daylight outside the Fountain of Rules, got a tattoo of a goat playing a harp on his ribs, where even future him would be irritated to find it. None of these actions would shake the world. But they marked him. They were loud in the river of time. The universe, it turned out, remembered shame. Bonds that should not be. When petty vice lost its stick, Artie grew bolder. He sought people he shouldn't meet yet. He taught a young orphan the words to a spell not invented for another century. He whispered a prophecy into the ear of a woman who had yet to fall from grace. He confessed love to a rival mage, knowing she would die soon, and possibly earlier, if his timing was wrong. Each interaction pulsed like a sun flare in his path. And each risked a rift, a tear in the stable flow of causality. One time, he taught an elderly baker a spell for heating ovens faster. In the next loop, the entire district had burned down. The baker had never lived past 40. Artie wept for a stranger whose life he'd ruined with kindness. These emotional detonations anchored his path. But they also widened the cracks in time. The body, as beacon. Eventually, only pain held firm. On his 33rd loop of the delayed city, Artie carved a small phrase into the underside of his left forearm. You've been here. You failed. The scar healed crooked, but stayed. Later, he poured hot wax into his own ear canal, muffling all memory-based casting until it cooled. Once, he swallowed a stone from his future self's spell ring, and vomited fire for 3 hours. But the moment etched itself into the timeline. In every version of events since, his stomach trembled near future casting sites. Finally, when he feared forgetting himself altogether, he broke his own nose in front of the mirror oracle. The oracle laughed and said, "You now have a face no time will mistake." Closing reflection. Artie began to journal, not in books, but in his skin, his relationships, his regrets. Time would erase ink. It would edit speech. But it never quite washed away a heartache. Or a wound. He realized, with growing dread, that he was becoming a man worth warning others about. Maybe that's why Helbarin had been so bitter. Maybe that's why all the timelines agreed on one thing. Chronomancers don't grow old. They just repeat their worst day until it forgets them. Chapter 4. The Imp That Eats Clocks. No one remembers summoning the imp. You don't conjure it with candles or circles. You make it curious. It comes when something precious ticks, talked out of turn. Artie had read only one reference to it in all the Timekeeper archives. The imp does not age, for it never arrives. It does not leave, for it never truly was. It unbuilds things. Not just what happened, what could have. Tracking the impossible. The first sign was subtle. A girl born without parents, but with a memory of them. She spoke of a song only they had known, one no one else remembered writing. The second sign was brutal. A clock tower in Frome Hollow struck the same hour 64 times. It then exploded inward. The sky above the town rained broken numbers for 3 days. Artie arrived on the 4th. The survivors didn't blink at his questions. They had no questions left. Time had stopped asking. He found the residue, melted copper, unmarked footprints that ran up a brick wall, and a scrap of brass wound into a spiral that whispered in rhyme. Tick goes the rabbit, tock goes the hare. One of you's missing. But neither was there. The imp had been here. The stalking through loops. Artie began his hunt. It took him across broken moments. A wedding, where the groom was always walking in but never arrived. A library, whose books rewrote themselves every night to frame a new ending. A ruined camp where soldiers bled from wounds they hadn't yet earned. The imp was playful, elusive. It didn't erase events. It refractured them. When Artie confronted an old farmer who remembered dying 3 times, he finally got a lead, small thing. Like a monkey with a sewing kit. It rewound my wife's heartbeat, and left. Artie finally caught a glimpse in the mirror of a shattered time glass, a hunched, nimble creature with brass hands, a glass eye, and a ribcage made of metronomes. Its laugh sounded like a gear slipping. It was building something. Something that needed to collapse to work. The final confrontation. Deep in the hollow verge, where failed spells go to rot, Artie found it, a spiral maze. Of silver tracks, each looped with broken pocket watches and pieces of people's lives. At the center, the imp worked. It wore a crown of our hands and a cape made of birth certificates. Artie Van, it giggled. The young old man with a heart like glue. Come to unstick me. I came to stop you, Artie said, drawing out his memory sickle. The imp's eyes turned backward in its head. You'll kill 1,000 futures if you touch me. Think of the artistry, the fractal collapse, the UN beginnings. I've lived inside fractures, Artie whispered. And I know one thing. He stepped into the imp's trap willingly. It triggered nothing. You didn't build a device. You are one. Artie plunged the sickle into the imp's chest, slicing through its metronome ribs. Time stopped, and then it shattered like a window under a winter stone. Reassembled futures. Artie woke inside his own body. He was older now, noticeably so, but the fixed points were still there. Burns. Scars. Faces. He stood in a room full of clocks that no longer ticked, but each showed the right time. The imp was gone. Possibility mended, though fragile. On his arm, a new scar had formed, unbidden. It read, "Don't rebuild what doesn't break you." Chapter 5, The Traveler's Wake. Chronomancy, it turns out, doesn't just affect time. It bruises place. Wherever Artie walked, when he shouldn't have, there was a residue, an ache in the walls of reality, and like blood in water, it drew sharks. The first one came through near Norell's orchard, a slick black centipede the size of a wagon, its eyes blinking in Morse code from another dimension. The villagers called it a misery whisperer. They never saw Artie arrive, but they blamed the wind for going backward that morning. He killed it. But it took 3 days, and cost him most of his remaining white gems and an oath he didn't remember making. Fray lines and faults. Artie began to see patterns. Each time he traveled, the weave, the very magical foundation of the material world, thinned behind him, like thread pulled too tight. Small anomalies followed. Children who dreamed languages no one had taught them. Lamps that flickered in rooms where no one had ever lived. A goat that recited names of the dead in reverse order. They weren't just oddities, they were cracks, and through those cracks came visitors. Some were curious, some were hungry. Some had worn Artie's face before he'd ever made it. the Journal of Anchors. To contain it, he created a map, not of geography but of temporal strain points. Each entry logged: time of arrival, direction of loop, magical cost, observable planar instability, local anomalies, for example, mirror dew, left to right decay. He called it the Journal of Anchors. Bound in spell-woven parchment, locked with a self-burning sigil, and encoded in 3 overlapping languages only he understood. Classical mageglyph, Low Malkin, and Psi sign, a symbolic breath-based notation from the elemental air monks of the spindle. If he lost it, everything would collapse. If he died with it, it might become a relic that taught others how to break time without understanding the cost. And so, he began writing multiple copies, hidden in divergent timelines, folded into momentary loops. He forgot where he hid most of them. Some versions of Artie may already be hunting those down. Each solution, more damage, every new rule brought a contradiction. Every patch frayed another corner. To avoid enemies tracking his loops, he began dividing parts of himself, emotion from memory, body from soul. One version of him wandered Yyth, emotionless, calculating. Another sat in a pocket realm made of echoing grief. One became a mentor to another chronomancer. One became a warning scrawled on a wall in blood. Philosophical fracture. Late in a timeline, Artie sat beneath the roots of a time-frozen yew tree and wrote, "Every change I make births an apology I haven't yet written. The weave resists me. The plains groan with my passing. This isn't mastery. This is erosion." And then, a final note. Maybe I'm not meant to walk time. Maybe I am meant to watch it rot and write it down. Retreat into study, he disappeared from known time soon after. Left his tower, burned his maps. Hid the Journal of Anchors inside a prison made of reversed causality. He built a library on a floating island outside of history, the steady locus, where he now observes, records and refrains. He calls it the Chronoseum. Visitors are rare. Requests to loop are denied. He no longer saves people from their deaths. He only eulogizes more clearly. He no longer interferes. He only remembers.